Howdy, y'all! The following is a clip from Objectively Subjective's channel where we do a show called My Last Nerveᴼᴇᴇ. Catch it every Friday at 7 p.m. Central Time, and be sure to subscribe to our co-host, #Heathen and Faithless Southerner. I hope you enjoy! Don't you laugh at me. One thing that does drive me crazy in terms of conversations between various groups of people and the individuals they're in is the application of double standards. Now, just so we have our terms defined clearly here, double standard is when one group is held to a higher or different standard than another. We see this happening quite often in terms of issues between classes and political parties. For an example of how this works between classes, I did link this article. I forget where it's from, but anyway, it'll be in the description. Crack and cocaine may be nearly identical on the molecular level, but people who are charged with possession of just 1 gram of crack cocaine are given the same sentence as those found in possession of 18 grams of cocaine. This 18-1 sentencing disparity is actually an improvement from the previous sentencing gulf of 100-1, thanks to the Fair Sentencing Act of 2010. But as new research shows, any disparity unfairly targets crack users who are more likely to be Black, low income, and less educated. The nation's coke problem is much larger than its crack problem, with 12% of the U.S. adult population reporting coke use and 4% reporting crack use. Yet crack users are still at a higher risk for an arrest, multiple arrests, or etc. in their lifetime. Now, an example of a political double standard is Senate Minority Leader Charles Schumer knocked Majority Leader Mitch McConnell at one point, accusing him of double standard for claiming Democrats are trying to delay a Supreme Court nomination. Schumer argued that McConnell's criticism was absurd and filled with double standards after Republicans held up former President Obama's Supreme Court nominee for months in 2016. Now, another way that I've seen this manifest in the atheist community is in terms of the Rationality Rules video, where he used awful transphobic talking points, saying that trans women would be the end of women's sports. And that was what was really bizarre about all of that is the double standard held by many in the atheist community who deem themselves as trans allies. While if Rationality Rules would have been a theist, they would have totally called him out on that shit. Like immediately, we would have seen countless videos debunking his bad science and challenging his rhetoric. But instead, we were given one reason after another as to why his rhetoric and intent was in good faith. Turns out it wasn't. Anyways, but granted, there were a few amazing creators who did address this problem, but really, from my knowledge at this point, only one large creator did so. And when they did, they got all kinds of pushback from their audience, despite how gentle their approach was. Now, my point here is, if we hold the outgroup to a certain standard, we must also hold ourselves to that same level of scrutiny. I realize that bias exists, and I'm certainly not beyond bias myself. And that's one of the major reasons why I think this is important, is if I make a mistake in terms of how I apply my standards, and if I'm being unfair, I want to know. The good thing about this group here, you guys, and most of you in the audience, is I know they'll call me out when I'm holding a double standard, and if I say something shitty, and I like that. That's what I need in order to better myself and be a good ally and progress in life. And I do want to say that for this, I'm really appreciative. So, yeah. Thanks, y'all.
So, one of the things that people tend to say that they absolutely love about me when they very first meet me is that I'm not afraid to call out someone that I'm on the same side as. And then the same thing that ends up making that person hate me is that I'm not afraid to call out someone who is on the same side as me.
Yeah.
Not going to go into details, but we have had a situation like that over the last week. And yeah, went along those same lines. I always say that I expect my friends to be better than my enemies.
Mm-hmm.
And if I am going to hold my enemies to a certain standard, then my friends are going to be held to that exact same standard or more when it comes to their treatment of other people or their acceptance of responsibility. And yeah, you see this all the time, the double standards. It especially goes back to a topic that Evans talked about a while back. Well, they're my friend, so I know that they're not that way. Well, no, bullshit.
Fuck that.
Yeah.
You can't say that. You can't say they're my friends, so I know that they're okay, because oftentimes they're not okay. So yeah, this is a really good topic. I know Evans looked like he was getting ready to say something.
Yeah, I mean, and I've talked about this quite a lot here in other hangouts and things like that. Like the purpose of rationality, right? The purpose of logic and reason and things like that is absolutely instrumental, right? But we have to realize that we're just as capable of these biases as everybody else.
Yeah.
And so we have to set up safeguards, right? And I like the analogy of the elephant and the rider, right? The elephant is and Daniel Kahneman in his book, Thinking Fast and Thinking Slow, puts it as system 1 and system 2, right? System 1 is fast acting. It's your emotions, your prior experiences, everything else. And system 2 is your rational thought, right? And system 1 is the one that takes control, right? And system 2 can kind of mediate and kind of steer. It's kind of like a rider and an elephant. And if the elephant decides he wants to go somewhere, the elephant's going to go somewhere, right? But it's up to the rider to make sure, it's up to your rationality to make sure that you have safeguards in place so that you can't just go everywhere. And the important thing about knowing our cognitive biases, in-group, out-group bias, you know, all of the various cognitive biases that we have, is that we must maintain these in the forefront, and we also must institutionalize safeguards like friends who actually give a shit about what you say in order to check you on it. And you also have to, right, whenever you're vetting good friends, know that if they call you on something, you should take it seriously, right? They may be wrong, but if they've been right on everything else, it's, you know, what's more likely, right? That everybody that you know has gone absolutely fucking crazy and they don't know what they're talking about, or you've made a mistake.
Right.
And for me, it's almost always, oops, I fucked up, you know? And part of that is understanding these biases and recognizing them when they crop up in our lives, because guess what, everybody? They will. You're just as susceptible to in-group, out-group bias as anybody else. You're just to cognitive biases and confirmation biases and everything else. You have to use your reason to self-police and to put systems in place to help you self-police. Otherwise, there's no sense in having it, because you cannot just apply it to everybody else, right? Reason, rationality, logic are self-tools.
Yes.
They're not for other people, right? You can bring them up, but they only matter if the other person cares about self-policing, period.
Indeed. It kind of goes back to the Stoic principle of, you know, what is within my control and what is not. Because what other people do is definitely not within your control. You can say things, you can try to guide them, but if they don't accept it, then they don't. So, of course, these tools would be more of use to me than anybody, you know, than me just projecting it out. The best I can do is be a good example and, you know, bring up things that I think are problematic. And I know you don't like that word, but whatever. Call out things as I see them. And if I'm wrong, I'm wrong. It'll be hashed out. But yeah, sometimes I am wrong. Sometimes I have definitely been wrong in the past. Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I'm done.
I was going to
Lost my
say,
thought.
speaking of hashed out, hashtag, do you have anything to add here?
Well, I was just going to say, I tend towards accepting that something is wrong with me more than something is wrong with the person that I'm interacting with. I am constantly telling these conversations to Greg, and I'm like, here's my reaction. Is that nuts? Like, is that crazy? Am I wrong? You know, how should I handle this? Like, simply with my upbringing, I was taught to be extremely critical of myself and accept that other people were the ones in the right as opposed to me.
Wow. And
Yeah.
I do want to point out that you do a lot better than most of the people I've interacted with. I mean, in terms of saying, hey, this is wrong and fucked up. And I think you don't give yourself enough credit for how far you've come.
Mm.
Damn right.
I do want to highlight that right now. So
Thank you.
Chat, if you hashtag is brilliant. So
Yes.
put an F in the chat if you think hashtag's brilliant.
Snarky.
Damn right. And it's only one F, Snarky. You can't multiple F.
Hey, I multiple F'd. I can multiple F.
Y'all stop being problematic.
Oh, hell. Well, it's a great segue because, ever witness herd mentality? It's quite a spectacle. And even more of a thing of which to fall prey to, even more of a spectacle whenever you fall prey to its influence. Whenever an individual gets the false idea that their peers must be correct, ignoring their own inhibitions about the conclusions of which the herd has succumbed. It can be harmless, even beneficial in times where you must make a quick getaway in like dangerous situations where you haven't really had adequate time to assess. We're kind of evolved this way, right? So, and the reason we're evolved this way is survival. We needed to survive. Now, like most biases, following the herd isn't always the best way, and in fact can lead to some very interesting behavior. There's an episode on Brain Games, which is a good show. If y'all haven't seen it, I highly recommend it, where they take a look at this conformity in action through an experiment in a waiting room. The subject, unaware that they're participating in this show of herd mentality, witnesses others in the waiting room stand up from their chair at the sound of a beep. It doesn't take long for them to just follow suit and start standing up on their own whenever they hear the beep, even though they have no idea why these people are standing. This instinct, while helpful in aiding our species to survive, has also led us to our own peril, oh so often, and is well described by Friedrich Nietzsche when he proclaims, quote, "One must renounce the bad taste of wishing to agree with many people," and defines the mob mentality as consistent of a smaller, most ridiculous type, a herd animal, something eager to please, sickly and mediocre. Now, if you observe this take place in discourse, you should find these words utterly accurate. Most of us here, I assume, are familiar with the argumentum ad populum, or democracy. That's a fallacious way of reasoning. But do we recognize the influences others have on us as an instinctual and social species? We have the ability to catch ourselves in the act of mindlessly agreeing with our friends simply because they're our friends, right? Do we often rationalize our way toward simply just conforming with atrocious and incorrect takes simply because we hold innate fears of abandonment by the herd? Just some food for thought, for individual thought. So, Yeah. I kept that one short.
Yeah.
And it happens regardless, because in Daniel Kahneman in his book Thinking Fast and Thinking Slow points it out as system 1 and system 2. And he does system 1 as just a set of heuristics that are quick to the point. They work for you. They're bred in the bone. They're as close to an 8 as you can get. They're things that you learned over time and things that were bred into you that you just deploy, right? There's no thought, there's no rationality. And one of the things is to agree with the people that are around you, you know, but that gets you in some really bad situations. And, you know, it's really hard to overcome these heuristics, right? Whenever they're deployed in bad situations. It's really, really hard to notice whenever it's happening to you and to take steps to avoid doing it.
Oh yeah. We're habitual, right? We form habits and we just kind of go on instinct and autopilot. But one of the main reasons why I love philosophy, a lot of people hate it, is it forces me to reflect upon this. Like when I read Nietzsche and I think, holy shit, he's right. Do I do this? And it really makes me just get more introspective. And I notice when I'm behaving this way. So I can slowly make changes, or quickly, or usually it's slowly because habit. But it really helps, in my opinion, for self-development. So you don't fall prey to these cognitive biases, these tricks.
Yeah. And I mean, it's very easy. Like, we always want to think that we're above the fray, that we're better thinkers than we actually are. And it's very easy to get into the herd mentality type of thing.
Hey, I'm an atheist. I'm done thinking.
Well, and a lot of people, like, when you leave the church, I have left religion, so I have left herd mentality behind. And then you find yourself falling for it again and going for tropes that are just bad. Especially, like we've already talked about some in the online atheist community. It's very easy that once you're deconverted to go, man, I know everything. And you don't.
I alone have obtained pure reason.
Talk louder, Maddie. I can turn mine up a little bit.
Turn it up.
Is that better? I hope that's better. So I'm talking.
We won't know for 2 minutes.
Yeah, we won't. But anyway, no, I guess like the idea here is, one of the things I always say is the people that talk about sheeple are generally the sheeple.
Irony.
Yeah, it's true irony, but the people are like, oh, come on, sheeple, wake up. How can you not see this? All of my friends know this. And it's like, well, how do you know that?
Well, I think it also speaks to, once you realize that these things happen, right? It's a lot easier. It's really puts to the forefront how important it is to choose your friends and to choose the people that you associate with. Because we know that we're going to lapse into these things, right? You know that you're going to go along with things without properly thinking about them, especially in the spur of the moment. If your attentional filters are overwhelmed, things like that, you're going to deploy support for your friends and whatever. And so that's one reason that whenever you are rationally thinking and going through and, hey, should I be friends with these people? Should I not? Should I disassociate? You can take these things into account, because if your herd that you have a mentality for is not full of people that are terrible, then even if you do fall into the herd mentality, you're going to be less likely to make a complete idiot of yourself or do something that would be normally against your personal ethical systems. Yeah. We see this a lot going on with people who are otherwise genuinely good people, kind of going along with the flow of things whenever one of the leader types says something abhorrent, right? And they don't want to be ostracized from the pack, but like, if you choose your leaders better, if you choose the people that you associate with better, whenever you do fall into these things, you're less likely to do so much damage.
Yeah. So to use an example, one of the things that the hosts here on Our Last Nerve get accused of the most is we're in our little echo chamber.
Echo.
I disagree.
But I picked Snarky and I, we don't even agree on a lot of stuff in terms of politics. Like we'll have real discussions at times about, well, this doesn't seem right, and just back and forth. But I picked both hashtag and Evans because they're able to disagree and say, no, I don't agree with that. And both can make me think about things in a different way. And so, like, we don't always come to the same result, but yeah.
Yeah, and it's like, I know that if I came to one of y'all and said, look, they they gave you the source, right? I would be like, oh yeah, they totally did.
Yeah.
Same for me. Like, if y'all, I'm pretty sure y'all have corrected me before, but oops, derp, I had a moment, and we need that. We need those checks and balances in order to stay honest, in order to stay true to our principles, assuming we have them, right?
What are those? Do you have a source for your principles, by the way? Or this topic on herd mentality?
No, I do want to. I want to point out that the sinister porpoise Lara said it's an echo chamber, but everyone is a duck because ducks supposedly don't echo, but they do. But it's very light.
I'm doing duck lips.
Very, very light.
Yes. Good duck lips. So I've killed it. So we're
Special thank you to all my lovely patrons. I so appreciate your support. Also, make sure you like, share, and subscribe and hit the bell icon so you can get notifications.